Suzanne a bunch of notes on the March minutes.
Okay, good, that's what I was hoping.
Suggested less detail. That we don't need to put in the minutes the changes to prior meetings minutes and, just, we discussed that she's starting with overdoing it and then paring back
Okay.
as experience dictates.
Better to be safe than sorry.
Pardon?
Better to be safe than sorry. Get it all in there and throw the beef out.
Indeed.
Steve, did you read the minutes?
You want me to read the minutes?
No, did you read?
Did I read you? Yes, I did.
Okay, good. All right. Is everybody happy with the, what was it, February and March?
I think it was December.
December,
March.
yeah.
Okay.
December was-
So is everybody happy with both?
Happy, satisfied.
I'm motion to approve the December minutes. Second.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Okay.
The March ones, I've submitted a bunch of corrections, so
Okay.
I think we'll just hold off on approving those.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. All right. Actually, Meg,
We have a couple
go
of
ahead. Go ahead.
guests. I mean, we have Don and,
James, are you there? You're an hour early.
there's a 10 o'clock with him.
No, actually, we're having a guest speaker.
Oh,
And the efficacy
it's the
of
TIC
the field.
committee.
Yes, well, no, it's actually not the TIC committee.
Okay.
It's the Green Committee hosting. I sent out a message for a month.
Totally missed that. I'm gonna have to go to work.
I know you
That I was expecting.
you do. That's fine.
I'll be,
We've already
and I guess Dawn will
discussed that.
special dispensation from
Yes.
the.
Anyway, I did it after
Okay.
a little fusion yesterday.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, Don.
Good morning, Jim.
You can hear us loud and clear, obviously.
Good Dawn tomorrow.
Dawn at dawn.
Don and Don.
And Dawn tomorrow.
Not.
Hi, Don.
Hi.
Okay. Meg, actually, why don't you, because you and I discussed the
Solid waste management?
New York State Solid Waste Management Plan.
Read the PowerPoint.
You did, okay.
Good.
The PowerPoint is very helpful.
Yeah, so the DEC is putting out a New York State solid waste management plan in an attempt to reduce all the solid waste generated in New York State. Because, our landfills are filling up. We're going to run out of places to put waste or process waste. So their goal is to do a statewide plan that helps to reduce, reuse, recycle, create a more circular economy where we're refurbishing things instead of just throwing them out, so it has to be sort of a change in the thought process and the culture too. But the focus of the plan is waste prevention, reduction, reuse, recycling market development and resiliency, product stewardship, and extended producer responsibility. So kind of putting more responsibility on the people creating the product. Organics reduction and recycling, toxic reductions in production. So trying to develop things or produce things in a more clean fashion. And then design and operation of solid waste management facilities and related activities. So the goal is to really reduce landfill use by 85% by 2050, which is a lot because we throw away a lot of things. So take a look at the plan. I put it in your SharePoint. I created a new folder. It says New York State DEC Solid Waste Management Plan. And it has the full plan, which is 99 pages, which is way shorter than any other plan ever put out by the DEC or the county or the state. And they did that on purpose. So there's a bunch of appendixes that have a lot of the more technical information. And the document itself really has their goals and objectives and how they're hoping to achieve those. So look through it. Their DEC is accepting written comment until May 15th. So go in if you have any comments, any ideas that could help improve this plan, let them know.
Did you have any, off the top of your head, things that you would think would be useful to submit in comments from?
Not off the top of my head, when I was reading through it, it seemed pretty
I
comprehensive.
thought so too.
But just if you come up with anything,
Okay.
let them know.
I mean, one thing I'm curious about is the, how we went from dual use pickup to single use, which I cannot believe that
That's
they're
good
able,
results.
that they're able to actually recycle very much from that system.
Right.
And actually, I've been in touch with Winter Brothers, who we send our ones and two plastic to. And I've been talking to Brian off and on for a little bit about trying to recycle number fives. And Winter Brothers they've been recycling number fives now for 2 years. So it would be great if we could start recycling number fives. There is a cost factor from the recycling center's point of view. But anyway, I put Brian in touch with the Winter Brothers recycling manager. So we'll see what comes from that.
Yeah. And the reason why there would be that cost is because you actually need a separate section to collect and
Yes.
process number fives as opposed to
Yes.
ones and twos.
Yes,
And that applies to the private haulers as well. They're not separating at this point, is my understanding.
well, not if it's dual. If it's single use,
Which is
if it's a
what
single,
everybody's doing now,
They
right?
just throw
Because at my office, we don't separate anymore because there's no point. It all goes in the
it
same
all
truck.
goes in the same thing with wet garbage too.
So can that be addressed at the private hauler level as
Well,
well?
that's gonna be one of my comments. To
Incentives?
that we should go back to, and Brian and I have talked about this too, that he doesn't understand, I don't understand why we've gone back to single use. It just seems a real big step backward.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got the blue bins already from when we were separating on site, for the haulers. And it just, I mean, should we touch base with the local haulers and see what their concerns
Well-
or issues are? I mean, Dan Binder might have some good
Yeah, we can.
intel. You want me to ask him?
Sure, if you're friendly with him,
Sure.
I mean,
absolutely.
I don't think Dan is doing the waste, like, he's not doing the door-to-door pickup anymore.
Oh, he's not?
No,
Oh,
that's
so.
a different outfit.
Oh, he's just doing
I think-
dumpsters and so on.
Yes, he's just doing the big C&D.
Okay, so I'll find out, we'll look at it a little bit from the user of a private hauler perspective at my office, and I'll just see what I can find out.
I mean, I did ask the recycling manager that question, but he didn't respond. I don't think he wanted to get into the dual and single use topic. But, now that I'm not, and I confess, I'm still collecting number five plastic from places. And literally what I take to the recycling center now is mostly, that's what it is, because I've been composting. So, and I think it's also an added expense for people on the island. Now, one thing that does not get recycled are nursery containers, the black nursery containers. They can't, they can't be read in the process. And so that's sort of a big thing that, I think the nursery industry needs to address, which is how to eliminate.
Or reuse,
Well,
problem with,
it's
parasites or something?
pathogens.
Yeah.
It's a problem for them. It's like taking a food container back to get refilled at a store.
Right.
You had a question?
Yes, first, I'd like to point out that I did actually wear the right shirt for
Yes,
this
you did.
discussion.
He did, absolutely.
But I will now get serious and say with my comments, to begin with, that I really don't know much, if anything, about waste management issues of that, only what I've been doing, and its relationship to energy, okay? But I will.
And there is a relationship.
And there is a relationship to energy. I'll get to it very shortly. First, you will recall that, this current recycling plan, the way we do things now, actually goes back, for the most part, well beyond a decade.
Right,
I'm not quite sure. So in some ways, this is a rather, the way we do things now, to talk about it is rather antiquated. The second thing I will say, it is been made more urgent. The issue has been made more urgent because you'll recall, not too long ago, I think it's somewhere between 3 and 5 years, the Chinese announced
right,
that they were not going to take any more.
right,
That was a huge change. You could see it coming. It was, what do they call that, like an earthquake in the business,
Right.
okay? And the third comment that I would make, and that this is where it's similar to energy, is, a lot of the discussions, again, I don't know anything, I'm not a professional, I don't know anything about waste management, but this is just my comments, because there's a similarity, is what we're discussing here, the 4s and 5s, we are in the middle of the waste stream, okay? Ultimately, if you want to get to where the state wants to get to in 2050, you're going to have to start at the beginning of the waste stream,
well,
which is
that's one of the things that
the
they're,
manufacturers,
Yes.
okay? So just as in energy, okay, and everything we are going to do in energy and have been doing in energy, it has to start from efficiency.
Right.
It has to start from, the beginning of the process.
That's spelled out in the plan, in
That's
the
spelled out in the
state's
plan.
plan.
Fine. That, and so reduce, I would say, is the big headline, okay? Reduce, and that's going to have to start at the
right.
beginning of the
So
waste.
Steve, what I'd recommend is if you don't have time to read the 99-page plan, look at the PowerPoint because a lot of these points are covered.
And I will do that.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. And the guy who gave Frank Vitale, he was quite impressive because not only did he do this half-hour PowerPoint plan, but then he took questions and he did a Q&A afterwards and was able to address every single question that people came up with. He was quite impressive, I thought.
Yeah, he was very, very, very well informed.
Yes.
At the other end, I know that Kyle Karen was interested in starting a repair cafe on the island, and that would be a great thing to figure out how we can support.
Yes,
I mean, I don't know if she's still, but I remember her posting about an interest in it. So-
yes, I actually mentioned it at the last meeting and there was a reporter article.
Okay, so maybe we
But
can help
follow up and
promote
see.
that, or,
Yeah,
we have a new member coming with
Well,
communication skills
so
potentially.
yes, so I just need
She'd be
to.
great to get the
Well,
word out on all
this is
these
something
things.
that Meg and I discussed very briefly, is that communication will be sort of a part of this process also. And that person would be great at communicating all the things that we need to do. Move forward.
And then, there's a similar thing to the repair cafe. I noticed that the library is now, you can take baking pans out and, they're doing all sorts of shared use. And I remember when I lived in this sort of discrete neighborhood in Sag Harbor, there developed a group, I don't remember what media it used, but to neighborhood share equipment that you only need a few times a year. So that not everybody was buying everything. So, I mean, I think that's another thing that would work really well in this community with the culture
would.
that we have is, I mean, a hedge trimmer or
Yes.
whatever it might be, so that we don't have all that consumption, which ultimately leads to, the obsolescence of
Yes,
those pieces of equipment. I'm sure there are complexities to it and, whatever, liabilities and organization, but I think all those kinds of things would be fun to promote. Maybe we can do a big focus on this at the Green Expo this year, reducing.
Yeah, what I'd kind of like to see, so this DEC plan is pretty new. They just released it a month ago. But they're going to be starting to implement it. They're going to try to start getting this rolling. And of course, they're going to start from the top up, but everybody's going to have to participate in some fashion. And for us, there's a timer going because Brookhaven's going to be closing down. They're going to be changing that up, whether it becomes a transfer station, we're not sure yet. But that's one of those things where we're going to need to plan, because even if we can still ship things to Brookhaven, it goes somewhere from there, that's going to get more expensive.
Right.
So this is going to become more burdensome. So what I would like us to try to do is come up with a list of ideas
for things that we as an island can do to help solve our own problem.
And that way, you know, all of these ideas that you've brought up are great, like teaching people how to compost, shared resources, having a like repair
Cafe, that kind of thing. These are all very good options, but let's like try to make a list and formalize it so that we can actually have a plan that we can implement over time, and we have goals for the community to hit. And I think that's kind of where we need to take this next. And I think the DEC's plan here has some really great ideas that we can work off of, knowing that we'll get support from the state, and that they'll be trying to do the same thing. We'll be on parallel tracks.
And we'll be opening this up, you know, the ideas up to the island.
Yeah.
Not just, you know,
Right,
us, but
right.
we should be able to communicate. And there again, that's why a communication
Yes.
medium is going to be so
Yes.
important.
Yeah.
This is the same
Yes.
kind of thing.
Yep.
So get people
Yeah.
involved and aware.
Yeah, and the best way for us to do that is to come up with a complete vision ourselves and at the town board level, and then we can really educate and provide services and assist people from there. So that's kind of our goal, I think. It should be to kind of come up with that cohesive plan of all the different things and how they fit together. And then we can start really
educating and getting it out there and organizing what we need to organize, making
Motivate.
space where we need to make space. Yeah.
And I think, you know, we can get economy of scale by going to organizations that routinely gather and, you know, use plastic cups at their monthly meetings or whatever. And also the one other idea that had come up was to lessen the financial impact of the more expensive recyclable takeout containers type of thing. Think about a way to maybe do some aggregated buying. I don't know if how that works, how people pay for it. Maybe it's a nonprofit that, I don't know.
Yeah.
But thinking about the different sectors, the restaurants, all the takeout places, the community groups that meet, and, you know, and seeking out their current practices, what the obstacles are to them adapting. And then even that can be, you know, fed back to the state in terms of where they need to incentivize with funding or whatever.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun to start that ideas.
Yeah, I mean, so we can even start a page on the SharePoint. Everyone can add ideas as they think of them, and just kind of have a shared document, just to kind of get started.
Great.
That would be a good goal.
You know, one thing that Brian had, we were going to have a program to sell little home recycling composters to residents. It didn't quite go as planned, but I think something I'm actually going to attempt to do is try to set up some kind of compost system on property that I have and share it with a couple of neighbors.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
I think if we'd have like mini community composting sites. My partner was just in Chicago, and they have a whole, which I haven't looked into yet, but they have a whole compost system there. And New York does also, New York City. So anyway, I think we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can actually go to other communities and see how they're doing things. Because actually composting is going to be a big part of this.
Yeah. Get rid of a lot of wet garbage.
We have a lot of wet garbage.
Yeah, and then the C&D is the other big piece. You know, processing that, breaking it down, figuring out the best way.
Yeah, and
That's gonna be a
also
big one.
working with the construction industry to think about ways to get reusable materials, not just left there for harvesting, but, you know, some kind of database or something. And I think as the work happens at Sylvester Manor over the years, there's a tremendous interest and intention to have a net zero impact in terms of building materials and so on. A lot of that can come from milling lumber on site. We have a new milling operation developing, but reusing materials from other places could actually dictate the design of new facilities based on what's available. So I love that idea of You hear about a whole house coming down and the appliances being trashed. It's just like that, it's that.
Appliances, countertops, refrigerators that are still functioning. I mean, there's so many things that can be salvaged before a house is demoed. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You can make a whole business
Need
just salvaging things from
Because
demo.
they're not gonna, they don't want to lose a day in their schedule, in their tight schedule for managing that. So thinking of this as ways to support the different sectors, I think is a good mindset for us. And, not just demanding and asking them to do better, but to figure out ways to actually help them.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about construction back in the 18th century or 19th century, if you took down a house, you reuse as much wood as possible.
Yeah, you've reused everything.
Well, not only that, but I own a home that was built in 1855. And it was built, Lincoln was still
I didn't know that.
alive, yeah. And of course, it was built primarily of masonry, but like so many of those buildings, and by the way, the house is not here, it's in Jersey City.
Oh, that house, okay.
Yeah, that house. But it was built to last, not for planned obsolescence of any time. And so here it is, 165 years later, and you go up to the third floor and the floors are still level.
Yeah.
Okay. I will also say that the house I lived in here was a kid house, Rich Homes. It was built by a family 45 years ago from a kid. Okay, Rich Homes sold them to kid. I actually have a big file with all the receipts of all the other things that they bought. But it was a kid, and of course it was very modest. And it is a modest home. So, scale, the scale of your dreams, let's say, is important too, from where you start. You begin with the end in mind.
Right.
And so, it's a whole mindset. I mean, yes, I was dumbfounded when I came out here 15 years ago to see that, people buy properties and just tear down the whole house, regardless of how old the house is, how well it's built, and we tear it down and we've got an architect with it. It's a mindset, culture.
Okay, so
Brainstorm.
we'll brainstorm, and anybody who hasn't read either the report or watched the
The power.
PowerPoint, please do, because it's chock full of ideas.
That's on
It's on the DEC's website, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, if you.
I'll send you a link.
Meg sent it around.
Honestly, I've been trying to stay in my lane, with energy, because there's a lot going on,
They're related,
but they're related, absolutely.
so it's important.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go on to our next topic, which is the ETIP application and energy discussion. So the four of us watched the webinar last week, seems like a month ago, last week, and we came away from it from differing thoughts. So why don't we discuss whether to proceed with an application, if we want to proceed, what do we want to do? If we don't want to proceed, what's our next step or steps? So let's just start.
Well, I was, reminded by the minutes that we talked about in the absence of the town having a set goal, like many of the, applicants who are in the cohort, the existing cohorts, that the idea of doing it as a planning exercise for alignment of ETIP process with New York State goals, because they don't have a New York State site yet. I think that's a valid idea. I think we would probably want to talk to the Island Institute about that, because, my main takeaway was, compared to the projects that they highlighted, we don't have the capacity that's needed to do it in the way that the existing ones are doing
At present, yeah,
at present.
and I agree with that.
Yeah, but maybe that's, maybe that could be the crux. How does a locality that hasn't set, a target for clean energy and doesn't have a lot of, staff time, people time,
Resources.
commit to this, resources to commit to this, how do we advance these goals anyway? And I don't know if that's a valid concept. I think that would mean another call with the Island Institute to find out if that has any legs at all. I came away thinking that we weren't in a position to pursue it as sort of bottom line, unless we found some way for them to adapt what they're offering to exactly where we are now. Because if we get into a situation where, the planning phase is only bi-weekly meetings, and then the real work begins, we're just never going to be able to, to step up to it.
Let's talk about that.
That's my impression.
So I'm assuming the so-called real work may involve a lot of data gathering, which we have done in the past. Don and I have done it. When we proposed to the town, they swap out the incandescent for the LED. Also, when we became a clean energy community, we needed to gather all the energy bills for all the town buildings. And it took a little time, but it's not entirely onerous. I have no idea what other steps would be required, but I think it'd be worth having a conversation with the ETIP contact, discussing these things.
Agreed.
The Island Institute.
Well, the Island Institute.
Yeah, they're our
They're the,
conduit.
right, they're
Right.
the provider for this
Right,
region.
but the contact, I think it'd be worth coming up with questions that you're just already raising and having a conversation with them and seeing, is this appropriate for us? Is it not appropriate for us? I'm assuming not everybody goes to them with everything absolutely prepared.
With everything figured out.
That's the whole point,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, although again, I'm just basing it on the examples that they gave from the
Well, the two.
communities that are in the cohort already. They had established energy committees and municipal commitment to clean energy by a certain, percentage by a certain date.
But we don't know, what they'd done before that to reach that point. It could have been, because they were already sort of
Right.
pedaling into the process, and it could have been that they were in a similar situation to what we are, where, and then as part of the process, they were able to pull that all together.
I agree with both of you for the most part. I agree with Sarah, and I said this before, that it takes a real commitment of resources and focus for an extended period of time. I'm not sure, we're quote unquote staffed up for that, but as far as, what you said, yes, I do agree that we don't know what the other example projects or the other example applicants were doing beforehand, but we do know that they're, as I recall, substantially larger than Shelter Island to begin with.
Well, Islesboro,
Okay. Maine, yes.
Yeah.
So what came to my mind, an additional thought came to my mind. So, yes, at this point, I sort of have overlapping agreement with both of you. But
Let's look into it further.
I would also, yeah, and we can, but I would also say, and I said this in my takeaway email, is that, going directly to the Island Institute may uncover, other options or opportunities, to work perhaps even directly with the Island Institute, because in terms of energy, and, this is my opinion, there are things that we could be doing right now, okay, that we've already basically been through the planning stage.
that's something else I want to bring up.
Yeah, and we'll get to that, but just as an example, we talked about the town buildings, and, I don't know where exactly where it stands in terms of the energy audits that were done. But, you know, the purpose of doing the energy audits is to precipitate actions. Okay, and so if we've got some good ideas from the audits, there's no reason why we couldn't move forward, other than obviously, you know, funding and so forth. But that, you know, the IRA may make that propitious, and maybe funding opportunities that we have now that we didn't have when the audits were done. So I'm saying that there are things that we can do now. We're also doing this communications medium
Right.
thing, which hopefully we'll have up and running, you know, in the not too distant future. And that's the kind of thing that we can encourage, motivate
Right.
people to do. So, and get started now.
Right.
As far as a more comprehensive plan, which is what I think the E-tip is, you know, even if you have the resources, you're talking about, what, 2 years out? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably 2 years out before you come up with this action plan. And so, you know, we've got 2 years now that there are things that we can do. I wouldn't want to, so I guess, to sum up, I wouldn't want to sacrifice the 2 years that we've got to work now against, you know, just more
Okay.
planning.
Let me jump in here for a couple of things. One is we have a comprehensive plan that we're working on, and we're focusing on that. But that's one track. It's not the only track. At the same time, we can be doing other things that you're talking about.
Sure.
So we should really be working on multi-tracks and not waiting for the comprehensive plan to be finalized. We've given them information for the comp plan, but at the same time,
I agree.
we need to be doing other things. So, which we can easily be doing, pursuing other things. The other thing is we made a pledge 2 years ago to become a climate smart community. So again, we've already sort of decided that we want to sort of reach certain goals. So as for addressing how we actually accomplish these things, I think we need to think about that.
And your hunch is that E-tip could help us articulate that.
Well, I think it's also an internal thing. If we need to figure out this committee, how we can actually, because it's not just E-tip and being afraid we don't have the person power.
Would this be a good time to think about growing the committee even beyond a fifth member? Bringing in some extra,
I mean, you can go to 7 if you
Don,
have
I
people.
won't forget you.
And so, I mean, that might be helpful if you feel like you don't have the bandwidth to do the work that's necessary.
go to.
I say you could go to 7 if you can have, if you find, you know, enough people that are interested.
Well,
But-
I would love to hear what Don has to say, but I also, from my notes from the conference, I have a few like key benchmarks of, you know, the starting point for applying that I could mention as well.
Let me just hear from Don first. Don, go ahead.
Oh, okay, thank you, Tim. I may be in the minority on this, but I take a very simplistic approach. That is, we don't know if we can do it until we try. And we've got nothing to lose by trying except perhaps some time. But even that time will be beneficial if we choose to apply in the future. So I think we should give it a try.
Well, maybe we could set up a date with Island Institute, you know, soon, but not tomorrow. And then we could think about,
Sarah, I don't even think we need to speak with them. I don't think they're going to tell us anything that we don't know already.
oh, so you're saying just dive into the application? Okay, well,
Absolutely. Just dive in. Let's see what we can do. The worst is, as I said, we've wasted a bit of time.
Okay, but do we need to dive into,
Well-
to make application, do we need the support
A
of
couple
the
of
town?
things. I mean, we need a core set of, a question or a set of questions,
Right.
goals to achieve, whatever that might be.
We need
And
to
then-
identify a project, yes.
And then the other thing that they said was essential was 2 stakeholder support forms from decision makers outside of the applying organization.
Right,
So I'm not exactly sure
exactly.
who that would be or what that is, but those were fundamental requirements to be. And also, they wanted us to be able to describe our community readiness. So I think if we can do those things,
I mean, I think that if we even just do the application, go through the application process like Don is saying, it will help us identify what we know and what we don't know, what we have and what we don't have, and what we need to grow
ready or
on.
aren't.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think just the application process in and of itself will let us know what information we need, like what we're missing. And we may have more of this than you know. I mean, letters of support, I mean, you could probably get a letter from Fred Thiel. You can probably get a letter. I mean, I don't think that's
Too much, I think we can achieve that. Identifying the goals, I mean,
I think you guys have told us some of what the goals should be, and that's just a matter of presenting that to the town board. Do you agree? And then community readiness, we can evaluate that as part of the application process. So it, just because it seems big, I think if you take it piece by piece, then we'll figure out, where we actually stand.
I think my only concern is, my sort of baseline concern is that we apply, we get accepted, and then we're not able to actually deliver to ourselves to execute. So just, I would like to have a better sense of comfort about that.
Go ahead, Don.
There's no
Go ahead.
penalty for failing.
Right.
But I think this is something we're going to have to address anyway. Right? If we're going to move forward as a committee and accomplish some of the goals that we sort of talked about, we're going to have a way of actually doing this stuff.
At least getting started with the process.
And if it means trying to attract more people to the committee, which I understand completely, is not a simple thing. But really pinpointing who we want on the committee for very specific skills, who would be willing to do this, but we're going to have to do this anyway.
Well, I'm convinced by the no penalty for failing notion, and we should give it a go. I think we won't allow ourselves to fail, which means that we're going to have to find the capacity, and I think that's the niggling concern that I have.
Right, so I would add to that then, that if we're going to go forward with an application process, with the hope and expectation, I would say, not simply that, well, we've got nothing to lose, but with the hope and expectation that we actually win participation. I think we need a commitment from the town, that if we do win, that we can move forward with the execution, okay? And not simply get to the point where we've won the application process. Okay, I think part of our application, and I think they even say that, or Sarah said that, is we need basically a commitment that if we do put this application together and we do win, that the commitment of the town to provide the backing at a minimum and, resources, well, hopefully that'll be part of the application process. We'll be thinking that through, okay? But that it will be there, that the town is making the application.
Right.
I think
But I
that's.
mean, yes, we do need the town support, but again, if as a committee, we want to move forward with the goals that we're talking, we need more people, I'm hearing, to help us accomplish those goals. And so I think, and that's something I think we have to do anyway.
Yeah, more qualified people, sure.
Yes, and it's going to happen, and it's going to happen anyway, whether
Well,
we apply or not.
I mean,
Yeah.
I also, I did take a lot of inspiration. I think I was just like, I want to be doing this, but I don't know if we can. So I want to qualify my
No,
reluctance.
I understand what you're saying.
There, I did make a note based on, I think it was a question from somebody in Eastport, asked, can you be new to energy planning? And the answer was yes. Vulnerability was a key factor in eligibility and in selection. And I think that, I don't know enough about I don't know how reliable our underground cables are. And then at Bainbridge, which was very impressive and had all kinds of capacity and resources and so on, they're doing everything, solar, wind, waste energy. But their two key things were energy resilience and hazard preparation, which I think, would be fantastic for us to focus on. And then Mount Desert was about efficiency and energy literacy in the community. So, all of these things are great to go after. And I stand by my no penalty for failing. Let's give it a shot.
Well, you don't know unless you try.
Okay, I'm one over.
Okay,
Don, do you have something else? Your hand's still up. Don has his hand up still.
you're on mute, Don.
Yes, I saw that. Sorry, I just had some noise in the background. But anyway, I can't imagine that we wouldn't get support from the town. There's really no financial commitment from the town as I understand
No, there isn't.
it.
No, it
It's
doesn't
just
cost
time.
anything. It's just time.
Which does cost.
Why would they not approve us?
When money's not involved,
It's
problem.
easy to approve
And
something.
if we publicize that we're doing this, that may be a great way to find out who else in the community is
Yeah.
interested
Gain interest.
in possibly
But the town,
growing our numbers
the
here.
importance is not just about money. The importance is that these are our town leaders and they are leading the rest of our community. And getting the rest of our community on board at some point is going to be key to the success of the whole project. Okay, again, there are substantial goals, and even 2030 is approaching rapidly. So, we're going to need to be doing things, I believe, over the next 2 years while we engage in this process. And that includes things like energy literacy of the community. I wrote that in my takeaway email. I think that is huge, absolutely, to motivate people, because that's how you're going to get it done. And I think the leadership starts from the top.
but let me just add to that, Stephen, that is the leadership needs to be, we're an advisory committee. And so they depend upon us to educate them about what we need to do. They can't act without some sort of input. So, that's also our,
So what's our plan of action? Who wants to start writing the application? Don D'Amato?
Don, you and I
Do
can,
government speak.
Let's at least, as I said, choose the objective, if you will, what it is we want support for.
The core question or set of questions
Yes.
for the goals to achieve.
when are you back, Don?
Maybe tomorrow, likely Saturday.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a lot of time next week, believe it or not, I shouldn't say that.
You jinxed yourself.
I have no time next week, but is there any chance we could, I don't know. We can't, can three of us have coffee at somebody's house and talk about these things? No, right?
Yeah, we
Can't.
can.
Of course.
Oh, wait, is that
It's a quorum, three's a quorum.
okay,
This is why you need more people. You need 7, then 3
okay.
of you can get together.
Two of us will have coffee next.
There you go. Nailed it.
I'd be willing to have coffee with somebody this weekend, if, or just sit down with with some
Go
form
on
of
Saturday
application.
I'm gone Saturday morning
Okay.
and
We'll,
next week
we'll,
is.
we'll work on this over the next week.
Few days.
I would only add that, you know, I reviewed again, as I said to Meg, I reviewed again the utility section in the comp plan draft. I think we had all agreed basically on much of the goals and objectives that are in there. Again, it's a draft plan. I think there's some, you know, editing and condensation that can
Yeah.
and will be done, but I think most of the grist is already in there, and if we sat down, we'd probably be able to whittle that down or focus that or fit it at least into the format that ETIP wants. And get that done, you know.
Would it make sense for us to just start by, like, I'm willing to just download the application, and Don, maybe you would as well, and just start scribbling?
Mhm.
And then we could compare notes.
Compare notes Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, I'll probably do my scribbling over the weekend, because I'm too busy next week.
Yeah, I mean, you can all fill out an application and then put them in an email and email them back and forth to each other and kind of, you know, if it's downloadable and you can fill it by typing, I mean, you can have one application that you all work off of and add your 2 cents to just help brainstorm it so that you kind of all have the same input.
Yeah, and I'm happy to, you know, provide support to that at least, you know, at this point, like I said, next week I've got a full schedule.
Yeah.
Not making any excuses, my wife has a broken foot, so that's,
You're busy.
busy, we have an 80-pound dog, everything has to go through my legs.
So I think this is a good starting point, because then if we do have any questions, after putting all this sort of together, we then can contact the contact if we have any questions.
Right.
And I like the idea, by the way, that we would be the first in New York, and we're an island. So I think these are the things that are going to make us attractive applicants.
And I'm really interested in the water between between Shell Island and Noyak, because that's something that they're working on up in Maine. as Tidal, and that's something that we have,
We
so.
talked about that.
And you've talked about that a lot, Steve, so I think that's another component that we need to include in this.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to talk to the folks at Island Institute, because
So, but
they're
let's
involved in that.
let's
Do some homework.
Let's put our heads together, work on the application, get together next week, 2 at a time. And then if we have any questions, go back to the Island Institute, but let's just do this.
Okay, that sounds good. So you guys have 2 homework assignments. One is the ETIP application and the other is solid waste management ideas for the island.
Yes,
So brainstorming these 2 topics.
yes.
And they don't have to be like,
Not formal reports yet, but brainstorming so that when you guys get back together, you can really discuss all the options and we can come up with some kind of formalized plan that we can then help educate the community with.
Yes,
And by the way, the next meeting is on the 18th of May, right? It's a Thursday. Because there had been some confusion back at the beginning of the year.
yeah, for some reason they all got stuck on a Friday, which
Right.
didn't work.
Right.
and that's the week before Memorial Day, right? Yes.
It's a full week before,
Yeah, it's a full week.
That's
10
good.
days before.
Okay.
Yeah,
Following
But it is
Thursday
the 18th.
is the Lions.
The meetings are on Thursday.
they're on
Yes.
Thursdays.
The following Thursday is the
Thursday.
Lions dinner honoring our very own Don
Yes.
D'Amato as.
Yes.
Yes, Tom. He's pretending not to hear
Don's
us.
dinner.
Going back, the ETIP application, as I recall, I don't have it in front of me, is due. May
Deadline is-
11th.
Say it again, Don.
19th.
And the ETIP app application is due May 11th, I believe. Is that correct?
I think it's the 19th.
19th, the deadline is the 19th.
Yeah, the webinar was April 11th. Maybe that's why it's
Okay,
in your brain.
good.
No, it's the 19th.
So we need
19th,
to
thank you.
get it to the town. Do we need a town board action to make this application? No, I don't think we do.
I don't think you do.
Should we make a presentation though?
I would.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you guys work through the application and you feel confident in submitting it, I would make a presentation. Yeah.
So waiting until, not with our notes and going before, but actually we feel like we put together something we feel is pretty much in place. And if we've had any questions, we've talked to the ETIP or the
Yeah.
islands of contact, and we have sort of a really good idea what we're doing.
Yeah.
Wait till then,
Yeah.
even if it's 2 weeks before.
Yep.
What's the schedule? Is there a town board meeting?
Well, it's
There's work sessions every
It's
Tuesday.
every Tuesday, Steve.
Every Tuesday.
And you just
And all
go,
you need is a work session.
yeah, so you just book time with the Tuesday and you just get up in front of them for 5 minutes to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Kidding. And just do it 2 hours and just give a
New
presentation.
kid in a school
Yeah.
bus, so I'm just.
Yeah, so every Tuesday we have work sessions.
The chair can present.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Well, and there's a town board meeting on the 16th. So
we
if you guys.
do need a
Right.
formal action.
So if you need a formal action, the 16th is a town board meeting. And
That might be
the
a
19th
strong-
would be when you submit your application, that's the application. So,
That might be a strong piece for the application for the stakeholder support forms if we actually had a formal resolution from the board.
yeah, so we can, we can work that.
But we'd have to do a presentation before the
Well, there's
16th.
also a work session
The same day.
on the same day. So
So
you
we
could
can do
do
it
a
that night.
presentation and then we could do it that night.
Okay, so May 16th.
Okay, and then we'd have to FedEx.
And then there's also, so April 25th is also,
Well, to get it to them on
Do
time.
it online.
yeah. Yeah, so that's something to keep in mind.
So meeting plus resolution. But it might be good just to give an inkling.
Yeah.
beforehand.
Yeah, this is something that we're looking into. Absolutely.
I'm going to have to run
Yep,
shortly.
I know.
I have one new business.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sort of news, which is that last week I got recertified with the Climate Reality Project Leadership Program. There were 2 live sessions with Vice President Gore and John Podesta, and also the leader of the Center for Environmental Equality. Really extraordinary content and many small modules that I'm still going through, that the focus of this was how to bring the funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act to individuals and to the local level. So I tried to really get that material from them, and there's a lot of resources that I'll have access to going forward. The latest slides on the impacts of climate change were, as you can imagine, astounding and concerning, particularly costs to the insurance industry of the disasters that have been happening. So at some point, I'll probably do a very mini version of the slideshow. I'll speak to the library about doing another Climate Reality Project presentation like I used to do when I was first trained in 2007.
That'd be great.
And a lot of it is, it's called From Acts, meaning these legislative acts, to action is the new training and the new program. So I'll be reporting back on that and getting more involved with the regional chapter and other activists.
Okay.
And I'll keep you posted. And next week, I'm going to be very busy with the online national conference of the American Planning Association, and I'll also be focusing my workshop selection on things that are relevant to what we're doing.
Good.
Cool.
Excellent.
Congratulations. Certification.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to run out for 1 second. I'll be right back. So we're going to start the presentation at 10.
Okay.
You're gonna go.
Are we
No,
adjourned?
you're welcome. You're welcome to stay. So
No,
we're-
I'm,
She's got.
I know you have to go.
we're done with the
Yep,
Yes,
so,
the green options
Close
agenda,
this meeting?
yep, so we're gonna adjourn,
motion to
What do we do?
adjourn, second,
Second.
all in favor.
motion to adjourn this portion of the meeting. And now we're
Seconded.
gonna
All in
begin
favor.
the second half of this meeting with a presentation from Moses Secure.
I just,
Is that okay?
That works. All right.
to you. I'll walk you out. Seeing.
All right, we'll be back in like 2 minutes for your presentation, Moses.
It sounded like.
All right, thank you.
We have with us today representatives from our Deer and Tick Committee, our Water Advisory Council, and our Water Advisory Committee and our Conservation Advisory Council. And then
Water Quality Improvement Advisory Board, too.
and the water, and yes, and our Water Quality Advisory Board too. One person is actually on both committees. So we have a very good representation, the perfect representation for your presentation today. So everybody, welcome Moses Secura. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Susura.
Susura, I'm sorry.
Susura.
Okay.
Yep, Susura.
Okay, Susura. Moses, so why don't you just tell us who you are, and also when you talk about the study that you did in the field, maybe you could just give a little background about the grants, working with Cornell and all of that too.
Sure.
Okay,
So I obtained my bachelor's from SUNY Environmental Science and Forestry in Forest Health, where I also completed a master's degree in chemical entomology. So I studied the chemical constituents that insects use to communicate or find hosts. After I completed that, I worked in the pest control industry for a number of years. After then, I shifted to my position here as an entomologist in Suffolk County Vector Control. So we primarily focus on mosquito control, but they hired me to determine whether or not the county could actually implement a tick control program in county parks, and to look at the feasibility of that, the overall cost and functionality. So that's currently what I've been working on for the last 7 years. And when I first got here, I realized that there was quite a bit of data that we actually needed before we could go through the environmental impact statement for that project. And as the data did not exist, we had to find a way to collect it. So we actually came up with a novel method of tracking ticks in the environment with our ARENA system, which basically details a arthropod recovery and environmental non-target assessment system. So essentially we can put ticks in our arenas. They're actually color-coded with UV fluorescent powders. So we have a very good concept of what portion of the population remains after treatment, what their activities are. And with that design, we were actually able to achieve almost an 80% recovery rate for the ticks that we treated with these various pesticides in the various wilderness settings we tested them in. Now that's kind of novel in itself, because most of the standard tick collection tactics, they recover less than 6% of the actual population of ticks in the environment. So most of the data that we see in published studies on tick control products, most of that, almost all of it, is actually assumed mortality. They are not confirming mortality. They're assuming that the lack of ticks that they recover are dead due to the treatment. And what we found with our arenas is that is definitely not the case. We found that at any single period of time, less than a third of the population is actively questing. And often these ticks will dig down under the leaf litter after a pesticide application to avoid the treated surfaces. And depending on the environmental conditions and what type of product and the formulation of the product that is being used, that can greatly determine if there's a level of efficacy that is worth making the application. So with that, we started working and designing that my first year here. And about the third year here, we started collaborating with Cornell University fairly exclusively through their Center for Excellence in Vector-Borne Disease that was funded through the CDC. And with some of our collaborators there, we also collectively acquired a Warfighter Protection Fund grant from the Department of Defense to test several of these pesticide products in our arena system out in more wilderness-like settings. The DoD was specifically interested in that because it more aligns with where our troops would actually be under their operating conditions. And most of the data we have available to us that's published is done in a much more manicured setting, such as people's backyards. So it has a direct influence on how well these products actually function. So with that, we've been able to fully test 8 different products. And not only did we do overall efficacy studies, we also did longevity studies. So with those studies, we looked at basically natural oil products and traditional pesticide products that we applied in the environment. And then we went back to those plots a week later and introduced the ticks to the plots to see if the 1-week-old application was still effective in controlling any ticks that would move into the area. So that was also a fairly novel study because we don't have many of those longevity studies in the published literature. So that's largely what we've been working on outside of the large-scale pilot tick control program in Indian Island County Park. So it's a bit of my background and the general information for what we'll be covering. Would you like me to share my screen now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay. So presentation slides that I sent out, there's quite a few more slides there than I intend to fully cover on this presentation, but I wanted to make sure that you had the background information and some of the detail associated with the things we're going to touch on today, because it will help you answer any questions or just curiosities you may have about some of the subjects. So the primary tick of public health importance that we tend to focus on is the deer black-legged tick because it is predominantly the species that can basically transfer Lyme disease. So this is a 3-host species. They feed on different animals as they go through their life cycle. The larvae and the nymphs tend to feed on smaller ground-dwelling mammals and birds, and the nymphs, but largely the adults, prefer larger hosts such as white-tailed deer. And with all of this tick species we're going to be talking about, the host quality level actually has a very large impact on how large the egg clutches are and the survivability of the larva after they're born for most of the tick species we have here on the island. So a high quality host would be a white-tailed deer for our area. A low quality host for an adult would be things like a raccoon or a dog or things of that nature. This species also has a considerable amount of attention in our area, the Lone Star tick. So we actually have reports of Lone Star ticks being present within Suffolk County going back to basically the mid-1700s in explorer diaries. So this tick has been here a very long time, regardless of what our published surveillance activity has shown. This is another 3-host tick species, but they are notably far more aggressive than deer ticks. And all the stages of this species actually prefer larger hosts such as white-tailed deer. So on a single white-tailed deer, you can find all 3 stages of this tick feeding. And that's part of the reason why they're able to proliferate so easily and quicker than the black-legged tick down here. The American dog tick, this particular species was far more common about 30 years ago on the island, where we had much larger rates of Rocky Mountain spotty fever, which is a relapsing fever. But as our land use has changed and as our field areas grew into more typical woodland areas, the species that inhabit that area obviously changed according to what they're accustomed to. Deer ticks are more for open field settings or ecotone areas along the edge of woods, that nature. This species in particular has a very close association with groundhogs or woodchucks. So in areas that are plentiful in those, you tend to see this species fairly common. Now, we do have a few new species in the county that we've been tracking over the last few years through our active surveillance program. So the Asian longhorn tick was originally found in New Jersey. And we found it initially in 2018 in Suffolk County. We found a few isolated larvae out in Ocean Beach. And then later that year, we actually found some larvae in our Manorville surveillance site. Fast forward to 2019, we started seeing nymphs and additional larvae, and in new locations such as the William Floyd Estate that the National Park Service actually discovered, and Lloyd Harbor. And then also we found larvae out in Southampton. 2020, we actually found larvae in Northport, Manorville, and nymphs in Babylon. And that year, we also recovered adults off of Shelter Island through a Cornell University student who was doing a tick surveillance project out there. Then in 2021, we found them in additional locations, and we've also found numerous more nymphs and adults. So at this point in time, we've been able to track the expansion of this invasive species across Suffolk County, and we now know that we have permanent established populations within several areas. Now, this particular species is more of an agricultural pest. It can cause significant damage to cattle and other ungulates, whether it's damage to the actual hide, whether it be a leather product, but cause anemia in the cattle, and as it can in large numbers proliferate very rapidly. This particular species is parthenogenic, meaning they need males to reproduce. So this is part of the reason why it's been such a successful invasive species throughout the world and all the countries it is currently an invasive in. The next species we've found more recently is another invasive species, the Gulf Coast tick. To date, we've only found 3 specimens on Long Island, but if you look at the map here from the CDC showing the current range, that map is actually very inaccurate. We know that we have established populations in at least 2 counties in New Jersey. We know that we have established populations in at least 2 New York City parks. And at this point in time, we have had isolated individuals collected from Long Island, as I mentioned, and they found isolated individuals in Connecticut. Now, talking specifically about when we want to try to manage ticks if we're using a pesticide product, regardless of what type of product. This data is from our active surveillance program. So this is tick activity from Long Island for deer ticks and Lone Star ticks. So as you can see, for the Lone Star ticks in particular, the adults, our primary activity period is from May to June. That's ideally when we want to do most of our control. Now for deer ticks, we do have a peak for the adults in the early spring that peaks around March. But that's actually the leftover portion of the adult population from the previous fall. Now, most of those adults actually will not survive, nor will they be successful in feeding because they're already lost most of their energy reserves through the winter. If you want to manage deer tick adults, you really want to target your fall population. And that peaks in September, going in through October, and in some cases early November, depending on the temperatures. So that's ideally our treatment period for adult deer ticks. Now, if we want to talk about the larvae for both species, those active periods do overline each other, so you can do a single application and target both populations. But one thing we need to remember is that the nymphs are not the breeding portion of this pest population. Typically, if we're looking at the actual control of the population, we want to target the adults that are the breeding portion of the population. And another thing to be said, most of these nymphs, about 75% or more of them, will die of natural causes before they successfully feed. So in many cases, we're actually treating this portion of the population, and it will not reduce the overall population going forward. Now, one of the big things that basically proliferate the ticks here is the white-tailed deer. We're all very familiar with what they look like. They're literally everywhere. But we do have some very interesting variation with this species on the island. And we also have Sika deer, which is a separate species entirely. But you will see some of these piebald individuals. They are still white-tailed deer. It's just a variation in genetic coloration. But all of these species will effectively be high-quality hosts for deer tick adults, all stages of Lone Star, and the Asian longhorn tick. So the issue that we have with the white-tailed deer, extremely adaptive. They can recover their population extremely quickly because they are a prey species. So they're used to being able to rebound very rapidly after predators knock down the population. Unfortunately, we do not have natural predators anymore. They're minimally hunted in our area compared to what they used to be. And unfortunately, the largest predator that we have for this species here is actual vehicles. Deer vehicle collisions actually reduces the population more than any known predator currently within the Northeast. So we know that
That sounds
we have
about right.
overabundance
Expensive way to
host
double the population.
Now, we don't have a lot of deer density studies from the Long Island area, but the few that we have are already 10 to 15 years old. And in many of those cases, we're between 30 to 100 deers per square mile, or 100 deer per square mile. So we know that we have a sustained overabundance of white-tailed deer. Now, if you're interested in more of the symptoms of overabundance, did you see the screen change? There we go.
Yes.
Yep. If you're interested in more of the symptoms of what deer overabundance looks like, I would recommend some of these USDA links to you. They detail how the ecosystem changes over time when you have too much herbivory from white-tailed deer. And that's literally the case for every green space we have down here on Long Island and in most of the Northeast. Our ecosystems have literally changed because of the overabundance of white-tailed deer. So aside from the increase in tick population that species has directly caused due to the overabundance, they are also damaging our ecosystem in quite a few other ways. Now, deer are the predominant high quality host for these species of ticks because they literally are sought after by these adult species, by these adult tick species. So on the few studies that have looked at the number of ticks feeding on these hosts compared to what other animal hosts are available, they've found over 90% of the adult deer ticks feeding on white-tailed deer compared to all the other deer ticks they found on all the other animals in the studies. So it's very clear that the deer ticks in particular seek out this high-quality host, and it allows them a very high level of success, which is why we have extremely high populations of ticks locally. And these are just some general gauges for what densities of deer tend to actually improve the tick population by lowering it naturally. And it also details some of the impacts on native plants and things of that nature. Now, switch to the pesticide types of products available on the market. We have our traditional synthetic products, largely pyrethroids, which are used for ticks. And then we have our natural oils, which are our 25B exempt products. And there's specific points that these products have to meet in order to be qualified to meet the 25B exemption process through the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. And the ingredients, active and inactive, have to be on a specific list that the EPA regulates. Now, if the active ingredients and inactive ingredients are on that list, literally anyone can purchase these natural oils and the inactive ingredients, bottle up a product, put a label on it, and if the label on the product might be exempt classification, they are not required to send data to the EPA or the USDA. Now, the way the EPA regulates these is they left regulation up to the states for these pesticide products. And currently, there's only 42 states and the District of Columbia that actually require registration for 25B exempt pesticide products. Now, New York State DEC does not require registration of these products. So we are one of the few states within the United States that does not require registration of these 25B products. So we literally do not know how many of them are on the market and currently being sold to commercial applicators. Now, that being said, aside from the registration component, there is no requirement for these products to send control-related data into the New York State DEC or the EPA for registration. So these products do not have to prove whether or not they actually work on the pests listed on the label. And when I was looking at these products, that was actually a little astounding to me, because coming from the chemical entomology background, I know that there's a considerable amount of variation in natural oil products and the chemical constituents that are within them. And the way that these natural oil products came about being regulated, it actually started back in 1993, when there was only a handful of cedar oil or cedar wood-based products on the market. And because the market was so small, they decided it wasn't within the EPA's interest monetarily to really regulate them. So as long as the natural oil products are GRAS certified or generally recognized as safe within use of our food products, they were basically added onto these 25B exempt lists. So that's how we came up with that list. There is no data showing the effects of these natural oils on non-target species. There is no effects of these natural oils in response to them going into waterways or anything of that nature. We do not have any of that data. So we are fully assuming that these products are safe for use within the environment and in other areas we apply them, because we have not done those studies, just to be very clear. Now, the formulation of a lot of these 25B products, every single one of them on the market is different. And as there tends to be very little background information that goes into actually reviewing and putting these formulations together, they kind of run the gamut. You have virtually every active ingredient you can think of that is on that list within some sort of product in all sorts of combinations. And again, none of them have data supporting their use for ticks or any other pest on the label, as they're not required to show it. But specific, just to show you some of the variation issues, we're going to talk about cedar oil. Now, within the cedar oil, natural oil realm, we have three predominant types of cedar oil that can be purchased and basically added into one of these 25B exempt products, items that are available for purchase. We have Virginia cedarwood, Texas cedarwood, and Western red cedarwood oil. Now, if you look at the chemical makeup and the predominant chemical constituents that make up these natural oils, you'll see that they are vastly different. You have Texas cedar oil here. You see the cedrol component is almost 20%. With Virginia oil, it's only 15.8. With Western red cedarwood oil, it doesn't even exist in that product. So there is a high level of variability between the types of oils that are used within these products. And in many cases, we don't know which specific compound or individual chemical is actually providing the control to the pests or the assumed control. Now, we do have some laboratory data about some of these individual components. But again, the actual formulated products have never been tested. Now, this is, I'll bring up the item about pesticide misting systems, because this was specifically brought up of an item of interest. Most misting systems that are currently on labels for pesticide products are for the agricultural industry. Therefore, the inside of basically animal barns or chicken barns, things of that nature. There are some labels that have modified these for use in homeowner misting systems. But there's very few EPA regulated products that have the appropriate label for that intended use. And now there's also becoming more and more natural oil products within that 25B realm that again have no regulation, that are becoming, their labels are being amended to include that type of application. And the issue is a misting system is considered a type of application equipment, and therefore it's not regulated by the EPA. So technically, many of these products could be used through a misting system within like a legally gray area. Now, the issue is we have many of these commercial products where you need to have an applicator's license in order to purchase them. And in many cases, businesses are actually selling a homeowner a concentrated bottle of the formulation, which that homeowner would not be able to purchase themselves. So it's almost like a secondary sale of a commercial pesticide license that you technically should only have access to with an applicator's license. So now we're giving applicator products to homeowners, which are highly concentrated, and they're trusting the homeowners to have the appropriate background knowledge to actively mix these things in the tank of the misting system. And then there's all sorts of issues with the consistency of the application from these misting systems. Unless you have a consistent pressure through every sprayer head, your amount of material per minute will vary. And also often they can turn these devices on at any time of day, so they can very easily go over the application maximum amount for the day, or in many other cases, they'll actually be under applying the product. Not to mention the issues with potentially coming in direct contact with an animal or someone within the backyard when these systems come on. Because regardless of the pesticide product, you're supposed to apply it generally when people are not around, and then when the area is dry, then people have access to the property again. So there's a lot of gray areas within the use of these systems. And also, there virtually is no background data on whether or not these misting systems truly provide control, or if they're just providing momentary repellency. And based on the information I have and the studies I've done, I would largely lean towards it would be a limited amount of repellency is what these application styles are really doing. So now the next thing I'll bring up is the 2021 pesticide reporting law data. It's publicly available data that the New York State DEC collects on a yearly basis from every entity that is actively engaging in pesticide applications. And these are just some of our numbers for Suffolk County that I pulled out of that report. As far as our commercial pesticide application numbers go, we are the highest. I believe we are actually the highest number of pounds and gallons of products in that report. So we do use quite a few pesticides commercially. Now, if we look at our pesticide sales to private applicators or the online, we were, I think, 5th or 6th really on that list. So these are all of our traditional pesticide products. These are the ones that have EPA registrations. That's the only data that these businesses and the New York State DEC collects in general. Now, for 25B products, businesses that apply them in a commercial application are required to keep daily records. However, that data is not sent in to the New York State DEC. So this pesticide reporting law data report that I've included for you for background information does not include any 25B exempt oil applications within Suffolk County. So realistically, we have no true concept of how much of these natural oil products are actually being used within Suffolk County on a yearly basis. However, the data is available. All of these businesses are required to keep it. So if we were ever interested in looking at the 25B products, the first step would actually be requiring collection of that 25B product daily use records. And then we would have a concept of what products are being used to what extent within the county. So now I will jump into the actual pesticide testing that we did over the last several years. So this is just a quick look of our RENA system. It's a very simplistic design, and it was purposefully designed that way so that it could be easily repeated and copied by other entities that wish to use it as a standard for assessing these products. But you can see here through this next photo here, we use a multitude of UV fluorescent powders to mark out the ticks, and that allows us a much higher recovery rate for the ticks, and allows us to really determine what they're doing in the arenas post-application. And we were able to tease out some very interesting data from them. So this is data specifically for deer tick adults on 2 natural oil products and 2 traditional synthetic pyrethroids. So we have Essentia IC3, that's a rosemary-based product. We have cedar oil, Cedar Safe, which is a cedar-based product. Maverick, which is talfluvalinate. We specifically looked at that synthetic pyrethroid because it was actually originally used within beehives to treat varroa mites. And when this product is dried, it is actually about 150 times less toxic to pollinators than other synthetic pyrethroids. So that is one of the reasons why we specifically chose that one to start with. And then Tall Star is a bifenthrin-based granular material that is widely used for landscape application for grubs and other things, but it also has ticks on the label. So as we can see from this study, this was a 7-week assessment. When we go out to day 12, we actually had 93% control for our liquid application of the talfluvalinate. So we achieved a very high level of control with a single application. And similarly with the granular synthetic pyrethroid, we achieved about 82% after about 12 days. So this was starkly different than what we saw with our natural oils. With our Cedar Safe product, we can see that we achieved just under 40% control after 12 days. So it was well below 50% of what we saw with a traditional synthetic product. And then our Essentia IC3, that was even lower than that. We achieved about a 20% control. Now, these studies were done during the fall peak for the deer tick adult activity. And if you go back and reference that original activity chart, you'll see that is that October timeframe. So part of the reason why the natural oil products did not perform as well in that time frame is because we're at lower environmental temperatures. And these natural oil products work off of vaporization. So basically how quickly they evaporate and are able to overwhelm the ticks locally. Under cooler temperatures, they do that considerably slower than warmer temperatures. So in the fall, it's expected that most 25B natural oil products would not provide a high degree of control simply because of the environmental conditions at the time. Now looking at deer tick nymphs. So this nymph population is active during that May-June period of the year. So we have considerably different environmental conditions. And as we see, the 2 natural oil products actually achieved about 56 to 58% control, which is a fairly good level of control compared to what we got with our traditional products. Now, that being said, the nymphs of deer ticks are a little bit harder to control than the adults because they spend far more time below the leaf litter, generally areas that are very difficult to get full application coverage with. We see from these trials that our Tall Star and our Maverick worked almost equally as well, but the Maverick did pull ahead at the very end of the trial. So we can effectively control this species and stage with our granular or our liquid products that we tested here. And also the natural oil products could give us a fair amount of control if we want to use an alternate product. The one thing I will note is before we chose the 25B products we used within these studies, we actually held smaller individual studies on almost 20 different products. And most of them performed so poorly, we did not include them in the arena-based study because we knew from the phase-out studies we did initially that they would not provide a level of control that would be acceptable to really include them in any sort of well-rounded control program. So, but the cedar oil and the Centria do have a place in those types of programs. Now we're moving to Lone Star adults. So we've changed species and we're back on the adult stage. So this species, again, they're very aggressive. They tend to move around fairly quickly, so they can very easily avoid treated surfaces if they have the opportunity. But as we can see here, the liquid Tall Star product, the Maverick, performed very well. We had almost 98% control. And another thing I'll add about these applications, they were all done with a backpack mist blower. So this was not a hydraulic application that uses gallons and gallons of water. We use air as the carrier. Each of these 1,000 square foot plots was treated with approximately a half gallon of water mixed with enough active ingredient for that 1,000 square feet. So that's how we did the application. So now looking at our granule product, it didn't seem to perform as well as the product did for the deer tick adults. And that's due to a difference in the biology or the activity of the species we're targeting. So if you want to control ticks, the biggest thing you want to know before you start applying products is what species you're dealing with and where they are on the route. So for this, the granular products didn't work as well because the Lone Star ticks, they don't have to rehydrate anywhere near as often as the deer ticks do. So they don't have to dig down within the leaf litter where you have higher relative humidity as often as the deer ticks. And these granular products, after you apply them, they settle down through the leaf litter, and that's where they end up settling out. And as they contact moisture, they'll locally treat the area. So as the species that doesn't spend as much time within the leaf litter, this slow release granular product didn't seem to work as well for them. Now, that being said, we tested another bifenthrin granular product that did not have the slow release technology, and it performed as well as the liquid bifenthrin that we tested alongside it in the DoD study. Both of those achieved about 93% control. So even within the granular formulations of bifenthrin, there's slight differences within the formulation that can actually give you vastly different levels of control with your tick population. And this is the type of control data that literally did not exist before we did these studies. So many of these pesticide companies are applying these products, and on these labels, it says that these products will achieve fairly decent levels of control. And in some cases, they will last for 3 weeks or a month. There are some products that actually claim 3 months of protection. Now, when we actually looked at our longevity studies, we aged these products for about a week before we put the ticks in the arenas. And we saw comparable levels of control. They were about mid-70s to almost 80% for all the traditional synthetic pyrethroids we tested in the longevity trial. So we know that they will work fairly well 1 week after application for any new ticks that move into the area. But as far as it working out to 2 weeks, that's something we still have to test. That's the next phase of testing that I would like to do if we are successful in our next subsequent DoD grant that we'll be applying for later on this fall. But going back to the results in front of us, we can see the Essentra IC3 and the cedar oil didn't perform terribly well for the Lone Star adults due to their ability to basically avoid the treated structures and the fact that they have a very thick, waxy cuticle. These natural oils just had some difficulty overwhelming the pest as they vaporized, and we didn't see a lot of control. Now, looking at Lone Star nymphs, so the stage before the adults, we saw very different levels of control for these natural products. They actually worked fairly well. We got 57% for cedar oil and about 63% for Essentra IC3. So if we're targeting Lone Star nymphs, we have a fair level of control with the Essentra IC3 and the cedar oil product for the nymphs. But for the adults, for both of these species, in my mind, it's kind of questionable if those products have enough efficacy to be applying them, because it's the environmental conditions post-application really determine whether or not these products will work at all. Now, just to give you a little bit of background on that, we had some arena trials where we had very wet conditions after application. And what we saw was the arenas that actually had, that were basically on the drip edge of a tree line, and they had more consistent moisture. We saw a considerably higher mortality in the arena population than the ticks within the other locations. And subsequently in another trial, we actually had so much rain that the ticks overhydrated. And this is something that was never documented in the literature. The ticks can literally overhydrate to a point where they cannot move. So they're stuck under the leaf litter for 4 to 5 days before they can get rid of some of that excess moisture and actually move around again. Now, in our longevity trials, we saw little to no control for the essential natural or for the natural oil products we tested after we aged the application for a week. So we know that our natural oil products will not last a week. They will not provide control post 1 week of application. If you make an application of natural oil and you have a heavy rain event, one, that can remove a lot of your application from the vegetation. But also if your ticks become overhydrated, they are literally unable to contact the treated surfaces or go into areas that have the vapors for these products to then be controlled by them. So after several days of decent rain, really our pesticide control applicators shouldn't be applying for at least a good 3 to 4 days to allow the ticks to get back to normal activity so they have a fair amount of control. So now we're going to jump to the non-pesticide options we have for managing ticks. And unfortunately, there's not many. We're really limited to vegetation management, deer exclusion, and deer management. Now, deer exclusion has been shown to work exceptionally well. And generally, the larger area you can exclude the deer from, the more effectively it works. And this works extremely well for Lone Star ticks and adult deer ticks. In some of the studies that are out there, within a 3-year period of time, you can have over a 60% reduction in the Lone Star nymph population after just removing deer from the area with fence. So no lethal control, you literally just put up exclusion fences. So this would be an option in some areas, but unfortunately this actually leads to other ecological issues. You'll actually end up with a far denser understory than you would within a healthy environment, and that can lead to accumulation of other issues. So there's several different options for exclusion. We saw the standard fencing, and the high tensile fencing is an agricultural option. That being said, a deer can and will very easily jump a fence that is 8 foot high. So if you want to have any effective exclusion for white-tailed deer, realistically, you need a 10-foot tall fence. And we know that that really is not an option within suburbs or most townships, but in the agricultural areas, that is realistically what you would need. Now, another option from having that 10-foot fence is actually this angled fence here. So deer actually have very poor depth perception. And when you have this angled fence like this and you put ribbons on the fence so that the deer can see the ribbon moving, a little bit of air movement, things of that nature, they will very, very rarely attempt to actually jump over these fences. So these fences have been found to be very, very effective, and they're not as visually obtrusive as your 6 or 10 foot tall standard fence. So that's another option that we have available to us. Now, from the vegetation management side of things, all of the vegetation management strategies really have one goal. It's about opening up airflow, minimizing relative humidity and moisture, because you need relatively consistent moisture and relative humidity for the ticks to actually survive locally. Without relative humidity, without consistent moisture, they will have to retreat back to some other area to stay alive. Ticks can realistically only quest for several hours a day, and then they need to go back under the leaf litter and rehydrate, in some cases for a full day, before they're able to go out and quest again. So we can modify our local environment, especially around homeowner properties and to some extent within parks, to basically make it not as hospitable for them. Now we can do that by removing leaf litter. You see the vast amount of leaf litter along the side of these trails here. So that leaf litter is going to provide a perfect area for ticks to actually wait for hosts to come by. And then as as you walk along these trails, the ticks will actually come up and try to get a hold of you. And I took this picture at this location because as I was walking across this boardwalk, ticks were coming up through the boardwalk, trying to get on my feet. So actually having these boardwalks within some of these park locations, yes, they have a great purpose for keeping us out of the mud and keeping our feet dry, but they actually provide a great habitat for ticks to hide. So this type of structure actually in some cases benefits ticks more than it would us. But ways we can reduce their activities by thinning the canopy, and that is twofold. It makes it safer for us when we use these green areas, but also it allows more sunlight into the area and keeps things drier. And then just keeping the leaf litter pushed away from the trail, say 5 or 6 feet, will greatly reduce the number of ticks that actively try to move onto the trail to acquire a host. And effectively, the trails and the ecotone edges of the forest are hot zones for ticks. Now, this is because as animals move through those edges of brush, they leave behind chemicals and chemical cues that they release from little glands, and the ticks are attracted to this. So over a period of time, you actually have a migration of ticks from the surrounding woodlands to this edge habitat, where they congregate and quest on the shrubs. Now, this happens around the edge of your property, the edge of a trail, the outside edges of parking lots, anywhere where you have consistent animal movement. So, based on where I spend my time out sampling for these ticks, you actually have a better chance of encountering ticks along a trail than you do walking through the middle of the woods. It's a very interesting thing to consider when you're thinking about safety for park goers and things like that. But some other options we have, aside from thinning the canopy and moving the leaf litter, you can create these mulch or gravel barriers. And basically you do so by creating a small hill of soil underneath them, and then you put a small layer of gravel or mulch on top. And as long as it's created properly, the moisture will drain to the sides and it will stay relatively dry. So as long as that stays dry, that'll actually minimize tick movement within the area. So some of these things can go a long way as far as protecting ourselves when we're in these areas. But noting the concept of public education and getting the public to follow standard tick check procedure would be invaluable. So I've been in this role for approximately 7 years. I collect in some years up to and over 15,000 tick specimens a year. So I'm surrounded by ticks pretty much on a daily basis. And I still have not been exposed to any of the diseases that we have locally. I got my blood work done 3 weeks ago. Following the standard education and just general education that these ticks are out there, and we generally will encounter them. If they're implemented properly, they can be extremely effective. So that's really all we can say about education. If we implemented it, it will be very helpful. So at this point, I'll just go over basically an overview of what your typical property would look like with a integrated program. So if you were to use pesticides, you would basically be doing a barrier spray along the edge of the habitat within a 3-yard area. And then this brown area would be your xeric zone. So that's where your gravel or your mulch bed is, designed to keep things relatively dry. And then anything you have on your property that would promote small animal activity like mice or birds, like if you had a wood pile or a stone wall, those are things you generally want to keep out away from your heavy use areas like your children's swing set, your garden, or your deck. And another thing to be said is if you have a deck, you really want to make sure that the small ground dwelling animals are not getting under your deck, because that will actively allow a tick population to establish right under your deck. So it's a very good idea to have this area fenced off if you're talking about private property or structures within a park, things of that nature. So, so we've gone over a considerable amount of information. I wanted to give ample time for questions, so that's I think where I'll leave it at this point.
Can you go to the screen where we can see everybody, so we can see if someone has hands up? Oh, there you go.
Sure.
Go ahead, Jim.
You have to unmute yourself.
Moses, Jim Bevilacqua. I'm Chair of the Deer and Tick Committee. A question about the natural oils as far as their effect on pollinators. Are they less significant than the permethroids, or do they still have a harmful effect?
Overall, I would say they are less of a danger to pollinators than traditional pyrethroids. But that being said, they still will negatively impact pollinators if they're directly applied to them.
Okay.
So we have had some instances where after we did an application, we had the individual bumblebee fly into the plot, and it did end up killing the bumblebee. So that being said, the natural oils, as I mentioned during the presentation, they're assumed to have a lesser effect on non-target species. There's no data supporting it.
And
There is no available data showing.
Is there any significant data talking to the what do you call effect of spraying lawns, which is what I think most people actually do, as far as actually decreasing the incidence of tick-borne disease?
So linking any existing tick management strategy to the actual reduction of diagnosed diseases within humans has almost never been successful within a study. And you have to keep in mind the type of data that's being collected for the disease side of things and the quality of that data. So just for a little interesting background for that, the only time that Lyme disease diagnoses were largely required to be reported was when the first Lyme disease vaccines were actually going through the initial stages of production and testing. Once those products were taken off the market, they no longer required the reporting or follow through of Lyme disease diagnoses. So the state does require it from, I believe, local doctors, but in many cases, they do not follow through and do a full diagnostic test if you get bit by a tick.
Right.
In many cases, a lot of these medical professionals actually cannot tell you the species of tick you're bit with, even if you show them the tick. Many of them are not tick literate. So even if you get bit by a Lone Star tick, which cannot give you Lyme disease, they'll still give you a doxycycline treatment for Lyme disease.
Right.
And
Okay.
so
What
the
about-
data sets for those are very unreliable, and they've never effectively been connected to any sort of management for ticks, despite showing a drastic reduction in the number of ticks or exposure to tick bites in the environment.
Right. And one other question, probably not in your field so much, but do you have any idea of where we stand now with vaccine for Lyme or other tick-borne diseases?
Actually, yes, there was a very good presentation that was given by a doctor who was working on the current Lyme disease vaccine given through the Tick Control Advisory Committee. What was that? On the 18th, so just a few days ago. And from my understanding, the meetings of the Tick Control Advisory Committee technically are public. So I believe that data should be available to anyone that's interested in accessing it. But there are at least 2 current tick vaccine products that are being tested.
Right.
only one of them, from my understanding and from what was portrayed in the presentation, is actually at the stage of human trials. But there are some interest in still improving the formulation of that, because it's largely working on an, I believe it was an OSP-C locale, which is genetically, that's the one that they find in most species and strains of Lyme disease. But they are looking to include as many species of Lyme disease as they can within that vaccine. But largely, most of the research has just been done with the Borrelia species that causes Lyme disease. It has not included Borrelia species such as Borrelia miyamotoi or the 6 others that we know are prevalent within the United States or the European, Northern European areas. So they are actively working towards a vaccine. And we do have one that is in clinical trials currently.
Very good.
That being said, that vaccine will not help anyone with anaplasma, babesia, Ehrlichia, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, or any of the numerous other tick-borne diseases that can be transmitted through the same tick bite that could potentially give you Lyme disease.
Correct.
So
Thank you.
there is, well, I'm stating that because there was a question of whether or not a vaccine would actually create a false pretense of one being safe,
Mhm.
and possibly lead to more people becoming infected with other diseases because they think they have their vaccine and they think they're covered from all of the other diseases that could be transmitted. So,
Thank you.
yep.
So Moses, just, I'm not going to name the company, but I have a brochure from a company. And it says they're preserving, it's organic, and it's organic tick control. So essentially, this control could still harm beneficials, and it won't give you the longevity that you would get from the traditional products. Is that correct?
That is correct. And actually, an interesting other side note, organic, the term organic is regulated by the USDA and the FDA for food products. There is no such thing as an organic pesticide. What we have within the pesticide industry is called an OMRI certification. It's similar, but it is not organic. So just the fact that the company is using organic treatment within their brochures is technically, it would be illegal, because the word organic is not allowed on a 25B product label, nor in advertisements for 25B products. So just to clarify that. But yes, there's no data supporting the notion that 25B products are safer for pollinators or any other non-targets when they're applied. Now, another thing that we noticed for the non-targets that were in our application areas, we were able to remove ants, various beetle species, all sorts of other non-target arthropods, including millipedes and things like that, from these applications. So they had a very strong knockdown effect for every arthropod within the ground dwelling area where the ticks were. So the notion that these 25B products are safer than the other ones, it's not 100% true. They don't last as long, so therefore the non-target arthropods would be able to recolonize the area quicker. That's realistically the only reason why the 25Bs are slightly better than your traditional product if you're looking at non-targets.
Organic on this brochure is quite prominent.
Yep, yeah, it's not organic. Organic is regulated only for food items. It technically cannot be applied to pesticide treatments.
What is there any, based on the information you have, I don't spray, so I'm not familiar with this, but I believe that residents contract with a company and they come at specific times, whether twice a month or 3 times a month, whatever it is, over a period of months. Is there any sense from your data that people are spraying at times when they don't need to, or when it's not really going to do much good?
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, even the pest control company that I worked for, before I was able to really, dive into the whole tick world, we were doing applications every 2 weeks with traditional products. And that's how many companies operate. They either do, at a minimum, a monthly application, or in some cases, especially with the 25B products, they will do every 2 weeks. And based on the activity data that I showed you earlier, there's not much of a reason to be doing that. If you're specifically interested in reducing the population, you just want to be targeting the adult stage. So for deer ticks, that would be your October, November timeframe. And for your Lone Stars, that would be your April, May. Now, if you need to target the nymphs because you have children or dogs or things like that on your property, that's going to be your May, June time period. So as long as you have appropriate applications during your May to June period, there's no need to come back and do anything from July through October. Now, especially if you combine that with some of the vegetation management practices, like pushing leaf litter away from your high use zones, and largely making it inhospitable to the ticks. Those are the only times in my mind that it's really necessary to make these applications. So I do think that they are being overused in many instances, unfortunately.
Not to put words in your mouth, but are residents overspraying?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Homeowners tend to overapply for everything. So it's not specific to ticks. If you look at how those products are used for the few studies that are really available and how homeowners use the homeowner version of those properties, they're almost always either under applying or over applying. They're never properly applying the active ingredient for the amount of square footage listed on the label. Like many of those homeowner based products that hook up to a hose, many of those can only treat 1,500, maximum 3,000 square feet. And in some cases, you'll have people treating 10,000 square feet. Or if they have a small area, they'll do 500 square feet and use the whole bottle. So it'll be a drastic over application. So on the homeowner side of things, it's kind of like the wild, wild west, unfortunately.
So I guess for the education of how we can educate people, is that something that part of sort of your program also is try to educate homeowners better about use of these products, when it makes sense and when it doesn't make sense?
Some of our collaborators through Cornell Cooperative Extension, they have done some educational things with homeowners. I've been to a few, but most of my effort in education has actually been with the pest control operators on the commercial side. So as we've been collecting this data over the past 6 or 7 years, we've been providing this data in public format to various symposiums and presentations to the actual pest control operators. And we're basically trying to share the same concept that you need to be doing your applications for ticks during that May, June period, or the period where the adults are active. So I've already mentioned what they are, but there's not much of a reason to treat outside that. And also one thing I've stated to all of them is there's very little reason to actually apply any tick control product more than 6 inches above the leaf litter. There's no need to treat an entire bush up to hip height with these products. Now, ticks spend less than a third of their time questing, so it's more likely that they're going to come in contact with a treated surface within the leaf litter or just on top of the leaf litter. So there's really no reason in my mind to treat the rest of the bush and also potentially expose pollinators or other non-target insects. So that's another item that we try to portray to our commercial applicators. And that does actually benefit them because one, it will allow them to use less active ingredient per property. It typically would make the applications quicker, so they would have a better return on investment when they're actually doing these for a commercial purpose. But also for homeowners, that's something that we try to portray to them, at least my collaborators through Cornell Extension do.
Go ahead.
Okay. I really don't know anything about ticks or entomology in general, although unlike you, I've had several encounters with tick-borne disease, one serious encounter, and I can tell you it wasn't fun. So that's my experience and the sum total of my knowledge. Number two, I've lived long enough to know that nothing is 100%. Whether it's, spraying or any kind of thing that you might do to reduce the tick population or to protect yourself, it's not going to be 100%. We've just been through the whole COVID experience. But the third thing I took away that caught my ear from your excellent presentation was the strategy of exclusion of, for instance, deer, okay, and how the deer tick and the Lone Star tick, which are predominant, if I may say, it sounded like in our area, can be managed through a strategy of exclusion. In your particular example, you were talking about fences, right?
Yes.
Okay, and how well that can work because you're excluding the hosts, the main host, the predominant host, the deer. Okay. We here on Shelter Island actually might have a very important natural advantage in that we couldn't put up a fence around the island, but we actually do have a very large, deep, and swift running moat around our island here, which hasn't, again, been 100% successful in managing deer. But if it were possible to exclude deer, white-tailed deer or whatever tailed deer might be involved from this island, that might be a non-chemical, if I can say, non-chemical approach that might, and I don't know what the logistics and the expense might be, but could have the potential to be a very successful way to manage at least the deer tick and the Rocky Mountain tick, which feed on the deer. Is anything I said here inconsistent with your knowledge and experience?
The exclusion can help significantly. Admittedly, you are in a very excellent area to try both deer exclusion and deer management. In my opinion, those would be the two best options for Shelter Island in general. You will have deer migration. Often, whenever you have, that's actually one of the issues with our current management programs. They're few and far between, and they happen in relatively small areas adjacent to areas where the deer are not managed. Now, deer pick up on density and food availability very, very quickly. So when the deer density in one area is reduced, the deer pick up on that from the neighboring communities or herds, and they will move into those low density areas. So if you do not have exclusion or fencing up, and you're also doing deer management, you will basically be attracting more deer over time. And despite the fact you're on an island, the deer will swim across that. They've been known to walk across the ice when it freezes. They will follow the roads and things like that. But I know you're completely separated from the mainland out there, but they will walk across the ice. But the exclusion could work very well. That being said, putting fencing up on a beach area or anything like that will have a significant impact on quite a few other things. Just public access. I mean, there could be issues with DMV. it would be difficult to kind of properly implement on an island setting, the exclusion would. But for individual properties or large tracts of individually owned land, that could be done fairly easily. It would be costly, but it could be done.
Moses, to this point, have there been any studies on Robbins Island where they eliminated a large proportion of the deer?
Yes, the tick population is largely collapsed. So there are still ticks on the island, but there's very few. And now you still have birds and small ground dwelling animals and things like that on the island. So you will have a very small localized population of ticks that subsist.
Nothing's
But it worked very well.
Okay, so really, it's managing the deer.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I'm wondering from an environmental perspective, what the persistency is of those different types of applications in your study. Persistent in the water primarily, and surface water and migration to well water, et cetera. How quickly do they break down? Are there any that in their parent form are persistent for long periods of time?
From my understanding, after these products are applied, they actually bind to organic matter. And the only real way they make their way into water in any sense would functionally be from surface soil runoff, or if the product is over applied and you have direct liquid runoff. So in those cases, that would be an illegal application. But the long-term, basically, the long-term subsistence of these traditional products, they break down fairly rapidly compared to many other things. For example, it all depends on the amount of active ingredient you're actually applying. So in the mosquito control industry, we have what's called ultra low volume application. And we're using the same type of traditional pyrethroid as some of these that we tested in the field. Now we generally only are able to use those products when we have adults that really need control. But with the amount of active ingredient we're applying in that scenario, the residues are gone within 14 to 24 hours. So that's for the mosquito treatment side. Now, a tick product is designed completely different. They design them for longevity. And as we know from testing, the residues last to the point where they're still effective in controlling the tick population for a week or more. So I can't give you a specific cutoff of when they break down to the point where they're not detectable anymore. I'm sure I could locate that data. And I know that some of it, I know that it does exist, and largely it is included when you do things like an environmental impact statement. But as there has been no environmental impact statement done specifically for tick control, I cannot give you that data specific to tick control products.
It's interesting.
Howard has a question.
Okay, any more questions?
Yes, I'd like to ask, first of all, it's a wonderful lecture on deer ticks and all sort of items. I really appreciate Moses giving this. My question is that it sounds like if we had an arid environment, we would not have ticks because the ticks seem to need moisture to survive. And I'm just wondering what irrigation systems, how they would be detrimental to both the ticks, or not detrimental to the ticks, but to the pesticide emission to kill the ticks. In other words, if you irrigate 1 week and then let it dry and the ticks go away, but when you start to irrigate, would they migrate back to that area?
Yes, actually, irrigation plays a very large role on homeowner tick densities. When I was in the private industry, the most consistent problem points we had on homeowner properties with ticks were the areas that had consistent irrigation. So you're literally creating an ideal environment if you have mulch and consistent irrigation. So you're virtually combating, your goal to actually remove ticks from the area by trying to provide a great habitat for your plants. So the two types of management really butt heads, and we see that in almost every type of land management. We're trying to manage for one specific item, but in often cases it'll be a detriment to something else within the property. But there is a balance, in my opinion, that can be found. One, we know it's actually not beneficial to irrigate your lawn and your plantings on your property on a daily basis. So that actually promotes disease within the plants, especially if you use overhead sprinklers. And that will also move the water to not necessarily areas you want it, which will just promote more moisture for the ticks. So in my mind, if you had your irrigation system set up to specifically water once a week or during periods of drought, once every few days, just enough that's needed. And where you could, you used a drip irrigation under the mulch line right around the base of the plant instead of these overhead sprays. One, you could drastically reduce the amount of water you use. So that's a good thing all around. You improve your targeting for the moisture. It's better for the plants, and it will minimize moisture access and availability of the ticks to subsist locally. So that's what I have always recommended with the properties that still require irrigation systems. That being said, there's also something to be said about the concept of xeric plantings. So desert type ornamental plantings and design. So there's quite a few options with that as well.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions? Going? On. Thank you so much, Moses. This was extremely informative. And I think I may have some further questions for you at a later date. And I know you're doing some more trials this summer, right?
This summer, we are actually finalizing our current DoD grant report. So we're not actively doing any this season for that grant, but we might be doing something with another set of products at Indian Island County Park. So depends on the resources we have available.
Okay. Well, thank you. You are a terrific resource for this type of information.
Wonderful.
Thank you. If you have any more detailed questions on anything in particular, I have an assortment of presentations that I've done over the last several years. I have a 45-minute presentation focusing just on Asian longhorn tick, if you have any interest in that. So if you are interested, just let me know. I'll happily send you the presentations.
Okay. Okay, terrific. Thank you, Moses, and thank you, everybody, for joining. And thank you.
Yeah, that was
Thank you.
great. You're adjourned?
We are, oh, yes, the meeting is adjourned.